Well. The gang is here. Recorded July 19th, 2023. Good afternoon, Andrea. Good afternoon, Roderick. How you doing?
Good
It is afternoon,
afternoon.
isn't it? Just barely for me, so I think for all of us. Maybe
Barely,
except for
barely afternoon. This has totally got my. I'm a creature of habit and thinking like, what are we doing at 1 o'clock? What's going on? So,
Hey, Brody looks a little bit different today.
yeah, Brody does.
Yes.
I mean, we've upgraded. So,
Our sweet Brody could not be here today, everyone. He actually, and he's not even doing something fun. He is having work to do. So
I would see what he's doing as fun. Maybe he can tell us about it one of these days, but I would actually have fun at that. But
well, it's still work. It's not like
Yeah.
he's on a beach somewhere.
it's work. Andrea, it's midweek. Anything special going on? Done anything cool? Break
Oh
anything?
gosh, today I was sitting in the webinar session about our new SASE solution. So that was super interesting. Looking forward to seeing more about that. Out there competing with Zscaler in that world for the zero trust stuff. So that's pretty cool. Other than that, looking forward to this weekend is Friday night is the Barbie movie. So I will be headed to the Barbie movie with some girlfriends to drink some rosé.
Rose and a Barbie movie. Can't beat it.
I don't know. I think I can beat it.
Anyway. Yeah, that's interesting. You and I chatted earlier in the day, Andrew, about that. You were watching the webinars and stuff, and will it be a serious competitor to Zscaler? We will see, right? Still in its infancy. I think you sort of told us about this coming last year of a sort. So, interesting that they announced they do an Inspire, which is actually happening right now. Inspire's going on.
Yeah, all this week.
Yeah, and it's the webinar series or function conference. I don't know what to call these things anymore since they're not in person for partners. And I'm trying to stay abreast of what's happening, all of that, and plus I'm trying to come up to speed on a new theme, which is my thing. But before then, was there anything else, Andrew, you want to share with us?
No, I mean, other than Barbie, what excitement could there be?
I will get to it. I'll tell you something that overexcited me. But anyway,
Ooh.
to the point
Is that also Barbie?
Would you be cool? Actually, they were talking about that movie. There was some type of 6 degrees of separation between somebody that's involved with that movie and somebody that's involved with the new Oppenheimer movie, which is the biography or the story about Russian to the United States quest to build a nuclear weapon on a very tight timeline and why they built this city and everything. Yeah, I read the book. It's different. I don't know if they can do the book justice in the movie, but they got some good actors. But no, for me, for a lot of our listeners that don't know, I am now, becoming a GBB, and my new product, stack that I'm going to be supporting is Defender for Experts, Defender for Experts Hunter, and also Manage Incident and Response Retainer. So think of the last one I said, which is like Dart, except for you're on a retainer for such things. So whenever we have our host only show, I'd like to talk about it, but I got to come up to speed on it, right? So I'm looking at it. So that's different for me. That firewall that was kicking my butt for months, I finally figured it out, right? You'd be surprised when you put the decimal point in the right place, stuff works. There you go. Yeah. No more shutting off. I kept sitting my big butt on the controller last week and cutting myself out. I have it right in my lap now, so I don't keep knocking myself out of the call. And other than that, things are pretty good. Getting through this week, FY24 for Microsoft. They're doing, everybody's doing their kickoffs and all that. So I don't keep knocking myself out of the call. And I went into Echo. Who did that?
What happens when you put that in your lap?
Oh, well, you're pulling my chain. Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute. All right. That's all that I have. Roderick, what have you broken this week?
What have I broken? Actually, I've put some things together this week. I'm actually pretty proud. Feel pretty good about it. I put out so let's do it this way. Inspires this week, right? Again, whatever you want to call these events, it's still happening this week. It's our partner event where we highlight our partners and announce some really cool things that our partners can take advantage of. And of course, it's Microsoft. So what is the theme of the entire event? Anybody guess?
AI.
Oh my goodness. That was too easy. Maybe I should have, I don't know, tried the question a little bit differently. Yes, artificial intelligence. So yesterday, some big announcements, I think, but the one that I really would pull out that I think is important for our audience is the Security Copilot kind of update yesterday for those that kind of missed the Inspire, or obviously we'll put some things in the show notes so people can go link to it and things like that. But Security Copilot got an update yesterday. The paid private preview will start sometime this fall. Not much of an update, but it is an update. Also, I think also important yesterday, which I saw a lot of discussion around, was we finally put pricing on M365 Copilot yesterday. So a lot of discussion around that. That really shot our stock price through the roof. If everybody noticed that, I kind of watched that periodically. I think some people retired yesterday because the stock price went through the roof. Who knows? But that's good. It's good news. It's good news. So customers actually know what it's going to cost to use this thing, I think. And again, I'll put links in the show notes. I have always been of the mind, I don't talk cost or price on anything because I'm always wrong. So I know what it is, but I'm not going to say it. You can go look at it. You'll figure it out yourself what that pricing is and determine if it happens to be something you want to take advantage of. Next week, so in that same vein, I finished a blog post this week about creating your own Copilot. It's actually pretty easy and simple to do. There's a lot of value for the things that Microsoft, the things that we are releasing. There's a lot of value, I promise you. But it is kind of easy to kind of create your own using the same services, right? Azure OpenAI, Azure Cognitive Services, Search Service, the APIs, and also Azure OpenAI Studio. It's really easy to create your own. There's a blog post out there on how you can do that. As I go along, I'll get deeper and deeper and deeper into it when GPT-4 is available and some of those actions and plugins and stuff, and show people how to do that too. So there's that. I only did all that because I'll be in Denver next week at a day of AI, where we're just talking about AI all day long. And I've got like an hour-and-a-half session to talk about security and AI. So trying to finish that up as well.
Rod, if we have any listeners, watchers in Denver, can they come see you?
Absolutely. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. It's at it's MEMUG. It's at the Microsoft office. It's run by a user group. I don't even know what that stands for. It used to be a user group specific to
System Center
management.
Yeah.
Right. And now everybody endpoint management, they're all on security and cloud and AI these days anyway. So it's a pretty interesting shape. We do have a new Brody on the show today. And
hold on before you go. You said never pricing. They also have released simplified Sentinel pricing. So it is not as they just reduced the price and did this and it's easy to do. It's actually something that requires some thought. So maybe we can get that in the show notes also.
Yeah,
right. that needs to be looked at because there's a lot of questions that have been generated around this. Should I go? Should I stay? What's the benefit of going to the simplified pricing versus the legacy pricing? That in itself could be a show. Andrew has written blogs about log rationalization and log ingest and take. So you can't talk about that without really considering price. And does this new pricing, is it relatable to the blog and the information she put out about that? So we'll have to see, right? Does it make you take a different approach of that? So simplified Sentinel pricing. Take that for what it's worth. But as you were saying, Rod, we have what now?
We have a new Brody on the show today. I don't know if for those
temporary Brody.
Yeah, temporary Brody. For those that are watching versus listening, for those that are listening, I'm going to start every week also including in the show notes the link to the video because they live on YouTube anyway. You can watch the live thing. And particularly if we have demos and things like that, you can go watch the demos. So if you want to see what the new Brody looks like this week, you can always in the show notes click the link, come back, watch a video, and figure out exactly what we're talking about. But we've had this, we've talked about this before in other shows. We have a guest co-host that comes through participation in our private preview programs. There's an award system for those that do a fantastic, fabulous job and put forth a lot of effort and a lot of their own volunteer time to help us build better products. There's an award system, and our co-host today is another one of those award winners who, for some reason, I don't know, again, we'll have to discuss this at a later time because I can't figure it out, has chosen our show as their award. So Malik, would you like to introduce yourself? And I'm probably botching your first name anyway, so go ahead and introduce yourself, pronounce it correctly, and tell us who you are.
Yeah, sure. So hey guys, Maulik this side. I am a cybersecurity consultant at Inspira Enterprise right now. So I have been a part of Microsoft journey from last three and a half years. Before joining Inspira as a cybersecurity consultant, I was a part of a cloud infra team in one of my organizations, and then joined Inspira and currently working on the whole suite of Microsoft security products. Right. So pretty excited and looking forward for this podcast. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Welcome.
Great.
That's super awesome. So how much effort did you actually put forth to get this award? Did it cost a lot of your time, or did you just like love to do this stuff?
Yeah, the hell lot of efforts. Yeah. Apart from working on a daily basis on our routine on our work, right? So apart from doing our work, we have to spend time on the private preview features and looking forward for what sort of features they have Microsoft introduced, testing on those particular features, and so it's quite been a interesting journey, right? So from last 2-3 months, so that's pretty good and learned a lot from this customer connection program, right? So
yeah, thank you so much for your effort, for your hard work.
Congrats and welcome.
Yeah, it takes a lot of extra effort, and we truly appreciate it because, quite honestly, if you look at, I use Microsoft Sentinel most generally as the example, but if you look at from where it started to where it is today, because of private preview, because of our customer feedback, it's there's a reason why it's a leader in the space at this point, and it's absolutely because of our customer feedback. So I appreciate it totally.
And once again, in all seriousness, thank you for choosing our show. I know we try to do a lot of self-deprecation, like asking people why did you choose us, but we really thank you for choosing our show to recognize your award and everything. So, but it looks like we got a guest sitting in the green room eating up all the snacks. Right?
Oh, we better get to them before the snacks are gone.
Yeah, the snacks are going. So, Rod, I believe either you or Brody invited our guests. So, do you want to do
I think Philippe actually invited himself. We were like, yeah, sure, you can come on. No, Philippe's with. Well, let's just let Philippe go ahead and introduce yourself. I don't want to run.
No problem. Hello, gang. Philippe here from France. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CrowdSec. So I've been evolving in cybersecurity offensive for 10 years, and now I'm in defensive security. It's an open source editor.
So you may not remember this, Philippe, but I sort of know your story already. We've met before.
Oh,
if Brody was here, we'd say, of course they have, Ed. You know everybody. But we have a person in common that we know, and so I got to hear you speak in 2021 when you joined the Secure Talk podcast. Mark Schneider is a friend of mine.
Oh, right. I didn't know.
Yeah, so I was in the background making sure he didn't do anything wrong because he always tries to do it over a phone, right? So when I was entertaining doing a podcast, I met him because when I covered partners, he was a security director or sales director over at AdaQuest at the time. So I still keep in touch with him. We have friends in common in Japan. I spent a lot of time there. if you know him, you know a lot of his family's there and here in Seattle. So when I saw your name, I'm like, I know him. You know, he came up. So
good memory. Good memory.
Good to hear your voice, because we didn't do anything video. That's a long time ago. That was like 2 years ago.
And for a startup, I can tell you this is exponential time. 2 years ago feels like 20 years ago.
You sound more rested than you did 2 years ago.
Yeah, because we rose found in between, you know. So you're always more quiet with 20 million. So it's easier.
Well, I'm glad the company sounds like it's doing well, and I'm glad that you requested to be on the show. So good to hear a friendly voice of a sort. So why are you here? You know, I'm going to act like I didn't go back and re-listen to the podcast from 2 years ago. So tell me what's going on.
Well, we decided, you know, that the security posture for the last 40 years is the go alone super soldier one in the industry, right? So you're a very large bank or whatever, you have a lot of means, you stack product, appliances, API, whatever, and you're safe from arm's way. Except that just doesn't play out, as we saw, you know, everybody gets compromised at some point. And we think this posture, this stance of alone against an army is the real problem, is the elephant in the room. So the postulate of CrowdSec is to tell, okay, guys, if we want to have a chance at it, we need to team together, like Waze, you know, for the roads. Well, CrowdSec is the Waze of firewalls. We share together so we block the attacks, and we share the public IP addresses that we've blocked, that we've seen as malevolent in the network. And since the network is super wide, like tens of thousands of machines, we curate those signals in real time to avoid false positive, and we broadcast back to all the members the block list that we have commonly established, right? As simple as it is.
Very cool. It's also in line to something that I shared with my team when I put the wrong price out there. That's why we don't talk pricing. With an internet scanning, you know, utility or tool called Shodan, and from back in the day. And so I was like, oh man, there's this sort of 6-degree separation. I'm playing with Shodan, and this is sort of what he does. But in addition to that, you know about the acquisition that Microsoft made with our ESSM. Are you, you know, just for clarity, to make sure I'm not assuming, are you in that same operational arena?
No, not so really. Because look, so if we talk about Shodan and back to the products, well, the thing is it's crowdsourced. So it's not coming from one source, a small or big client. It's real workloads. It's not honeypots either. So it's real traffic coming from real clients running real workloads that have value for the adversaries. So for example, you cannot expect an adversary, a real adversary, to send some meaningful resources against you, like DDoS, for example, because it costs him something, right? Or an exploit that is very private. He will not use them against you because he's mass scanning the internet. So this is what honeypots are catching. CrowdSec is catching real behaviors as seen in your logs. So as such, we're a security engine that confronts your logs, so a source of facts, and some behaviors, a source of rules. So for example, we'd say, you're not allowed to fail your password 10 times in a row with different usernames, by the way, because it's called password brute force. You're not allowed to make 10 times different credit card numbers and try to have $1 transaction because it's credit card stuffing. You're not allowed to automatically buy product and resell them on eBay and so on and forth, scan my VoIP, scan my ports, scan my URLs and so on. And all those events leave trace in the logs, right? And we analyze those logs, we extract the behavior, we block the IP address with something you already have in your network usually. Could be a firewall, an appliance, your reverse proxy, your load balance, or whatever. We just inform the SOC. And once it's remediated, then we share this IOC with the global network. And this is how we do the curation. So as such, you don't really play the Simon Say game. You know, the Simon Say, like, Simon say you need an XDR. Simon say you need an old balancer. Simon say you need the whatever latest technology. So we don't really fit into any category, yet we bring something new at the table.
Okay, all right. And so I went back to your site and looked through it, and maybe I just looked in the wrong place. How do you consume your product? It's subscription based, correct?
Yes, so the product as such is free on open source, so anyone can use it. So the next door hospital, your granny, whomever can use it for free to defend themselves. Usually your gurney doesn't defend an exposed internet workload, but hey, who knows? But the hospital may do this. And then if you like the product and you want an extra layer of services, like longer storage of your events and so on, then you can have a 1-year retention of the data. Multi-tenancy, a lot of things like this are services we sell on top of this, and subscription indeed for the data. So, for example, if you just want to interact with the data, interface them in your own product, you can totally query us through API. And that's the way we work, and that's the way we make money. So it's based on open source, but it's a fair trade. We tell the community, we provide you with a great tool, open source, free of charge, and in return, we get the signals, and we make money out of the signals. And this is a kind of a deal that is very balanced with the community. So everybody, is a winner in this.
Absolutely.
So how does, the one-offs, the people that aren't paying for it, how do they take advantage of this? Is there an agent they install, or is there something along those lines?
Yeah, so you can definitely just consume the data if you want as a CTI source. That it's pre-compromission instead of post-compromission with the usual CTI data. And you can install the security engine, which is available on GitHub, but we provide packages for pretty much all the environments, obviously Microsoft Windows as well. So you can install it in BSD, Linux, Windows environments, and it will take the load source that you send at it. It could be files, it could be a database, it could be cloud-borne logs, whatever you want, Defender, and it will pass the logs and see if someone is trying to do lateral moves, scans, or whatever, and deal with them.
So when it parses these logs, I guess it sends those signals to your service, and then that's when other people can take advantage of those signals, right?
Well, just one thing about that, it's not exactly what's happening. We don't export the logs as such. We never do it because that would be dangerous. What we do is we export the meta. The meta are the timestamp, the IP address, and the behavior it tried to pull. That way, we don't have to deal with your logs. Your logs stay where they are. We just take the metadata, and this renders us GDPR compatible, which is important for the European clients.
That is interesting. So you're pulling your own signal out, and that's what gets sent to, right? Gotcha.
Yes, and if you don't want to share, you don't have to. Maybe some institution, like some large banks, are not even allowed to share those, or they don't want to. They don't have to. If they don't share, they can get the signals, but in return, they have to pay for them.
Right. And so I guess from you mentioned a little bit earlier some of the security operations centers and things like that, and you talked about the API. You and I had kind of discussed this before we went live, Philippe, about obviously I had Microsoft, so I'm thinking Microsoft Sentinel, but I've worked with other types of SIEMs, right? Splunk, Logarithm, all that stuff. So will this integrate with those types of systems? Is it like a taxi service or some other?
Yeah, absolutely. So we cover taxi. We're also compatible with the MIT formatting and so on, and sticks as well. So we also can interact with pretty much any kind of data source like ELK, Elasticsearch, Kibana, whatever. So it's fairly easy to integrate us, and it's fully API driven. So if you want to consume the information or if you want to send information, you can do it totally in an API manner. That's how we interact with our ecosystem.
That's awesome. Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, you and I need to get together and we need to figure out how to get this working with Microsoft Sentinel. I think that would be super awesome for people to be able to consume the signals that you're collecting, right? That's important. TI is a big thing for us. Obviously, at Microsoft, we have a lot of our own TI, which is super great. But the more, it's kind of just my thought as a security person, the more TI I can get, and not TI, but trusted TI. A lot of people kind of forget that word. Trusted threat intelligence, the better off you're going to be, right? Because not every TI source is going to have everything. So you want to get as much as you can.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there are diversified sources. CrowdSec brings something very specific at the table. The IP list of aggressive IP addresses, as we speak now, that have been validated over a short period of time, recent period of time, so there's nothing outdated. We bring you the context, who they were aggressive to, what country, what kind of services, what behavior they pulled, and this zero false positive. And if you take like very sophisticated actors, like the one we're talking with in the United States, most of them report that 80% of the IP addresses we are bringing are unknown to them. So they are very happy with getting new visibility over what's happening.
See, I think that's key. Again, getting as many trusted source, verified sources as possible. And you just said it, right? We're giving people unknowns, right? We're collecting things other people aren't, which is super important. I think Malik, do you want to come off mute and ask a question?
Yeah, sure. So hey Philip, I hope you are doing well. So my question specifically to you is how you treat your database in backend for your CrowdSec, right? So also like how you assess a specific set of IP addresses, whether it is vulnerable or not. Is there any specific tool? It is working in backend for search engine or how it is?
For you as a client or for us as a provider?
For you as a provider.
We actually rely a lot on the cloud infrastructures. So we are storing this in a large database directly on the cloud. Actually, for now it's AWS, but we are expanding to GCP and hopefully also Azure if we can find a deal. And this is how we store our data. We don't want to have any kind of infrastructure of our own. It's too complicated to run. It's too risky. We'd rather rely on you guys because you know how to scale to the roof. And sometimes we have spikes, like during the log project crisis, CrowdSec was queried a lot, like literally a lot. So we love to have these containers being able to pop out of the blue and answer our clients on the fly.
Yeah, I think if you look, one of our commenters has already said that Sentinel integration will be great. So we need to work on that here shortly. So the other thing, there was a question here, just in that discussion about how your solution works. Is this similar? How is this different from the other threat intel vendors? Obviously, we have already talked about you want as much TI as possible, but how does this work differently than the others, I guess?
So a lot of the TI vendors, what they do is they actually put some honeypots online and they wait for attacks to pop to their way. So this is how they collect ingress aggressions. So the way they do it is simulating a fake WordPress server as a poorly defended Microsoft server or Linux or whatever. And they listen to this background noise of attacks that are consistently striking them. As I said, the problem here is that you will never get some business logic here. You get some dumb robots trying to attack everyone and anyone blindly with like basic techniques like scanners, like brute force and so on. It's not that it's uninteresting, it's just like it's not sophisticated. What CrowdSec can do, since it's defending real workloads, it sees real traffic. So I'm going to give you an example, for example, very, very pragmatic. If you're a retailer, right, and you sell, say, GTX, NVIDIA says GTX graphic cards, and there is a shortage. Everyone wants to buy them, or PlayStation 5 or whatever. Everyone wants to buy them, and there's none on the market. As soon as Walmart has some in store, there will be a robot buying them right away and reselling them on eBay. This is not per se a technical exploit. It's just a robot attacking you and doing stuff you don't want to see on your network. But still, this is behavioral, so we can catch it in the logs. So the limit of how you want to interact with those data, the limit of what you want to collect is just set by you, actually. So that's how we collect, for example, a lot of DDoS, IPs that are involved in DDoS. We put them into cohorts, and we say those IPs are all doing DDoS against, say, retail vertical or banking vertical. So that's why we are different. We collect this based solely on the behavior they have toward your exposed workloads. There's another way you can collect data, like Microsoft does, for example, by analyzing the binaries, right? And saying, this malware is trying to connect back to this command and control channel. With that, we don't do. This is egress traffic. This is traffic coming from your LAN toward the internet. What we deal with is the ingress traffic, which still accounts for something like 53% of the successful intrusion. So it's not marginal, as opposed to 40% for phishing, which is still very important.
So Philippe, this is a super, and I keep saying super because Rob said it like 3 times. This is a very interesting niche. I mean, a very narrow one. How did your career take you into this particular place?
Yeah, thank you, Andrea, for the question. Actually, I was doing defensive security for a living in my previous company, and we had built a very strong system, very solid, very resilient, but it was a bit complex. It took us up to 2 months to put a client in production. Really complex. So we thought about how do we get the best of it? And we were puzzled with my CTO. And at some point, we had an attack on a very major client. It's Intersport, so it's a French brand, it's a German brand, sorry, sport brand, right? And we're like, okay, the guys are spending 6,000 different IP addresses just to breach into this website during the Olympic Games. What do we do with these IPs? We know they are malevolent. We know they are under control, the control of a cyber criminal. But who would trust us? We are in an MSSP. Nobody is going to say, okay, we're going to adopt this IP address. We're going to blacklist them. For how long? And is it even legal to do so in the first place? So we were puzzled. We had a really good intel and nobody could use it. So we wanted to make it actionable, weaponizable, that you can use it in the field, that it would be trustworthy source. So that's why we decided to have this open source product that would spread all across the globe. We have 250,000 installs to date, and share the signals all together and curate them all together in a Waze fashion. And this is a long path that dates back from 2002 for me. I was so upset to have a static firewall. Static firewalling doesn't make sense. It's like saying Philippe is a good guy. Well, if Philippe is under constraint because his wife is taken on stage, Philippe is not a good guy anymore. Philippe is going to do what he is asked, And this is where the behavior changes everything. Because an IP can be clean one day, compromise another day, and clean the next day. So you need to have a very dynamic system. So it's a train of thought that took me to the point that I wanted to have a dynamic firewall. A firewall that would react not based on a static rule set, but on whatever is happening in reality. And the best way we found to identify this is the behavioral aspect.
That is a truly interesting story.
Yep. And what challenges are you facing? I mean, it sounds like you're still making strides, you're doing things, but what challenges have you had to overcome in your technology model and everything? Because as I'm looking at it, it's a lot of stuff is sort of based on assuming that the information that you're getting is accurate and not being, obfuscated, manipulated. But you sort of alluded to it. So give me some challenges you've had to overcome running this particular model, because it sounds like you've overcome the open source stuff, because people see open source, they see free, but you figured out that symbiotic relationship.
Well, and I love, you go to their website, there's the GitHub link to the repository, right?
Yeah.
So it's a mean to an end. The open source is a mean to an end. So there's the software, it's free, you get signal, you set signals, that's a done deal. But to answer your question, Edward, the main problem is the Byzantine general attack. So the thing is, if you have a network that is open like this and everyone can partake, someone can try to poison you, right? So let's say a lot of machines are telling me that Super Andrea's IP is rogue and is aggressive, but it's competitors of Super Andrea. They don't want her in the game anymore. So they want to blocklist her for a while. And how do we deal with those? Because it's really complicated to be sure that people are telling you the truth when they report you something, specifically with an open source software. So the way we do it is we need to have vetted machines. So they have to be in the network for a while already so that we trust them, 6 months. So there's a quarantine time. And then on top of that, they have to offer enough diversity. So they have to have been installed in different times, in different places, like very different locations, AS number or IP ranges. They have to report different signals at different times so that we know they are not under the control of the same person that is trying to make us think that Super Andrea is bad, whereas she's not. So this Byzantine attack is super complex to deal with. It took us a year to figure out. And then also we had on top, so now we are on the safe side. There never was any false positive broadcasted by our system. But on top of that, we have, for example, a whitelist of allowance. So for example, you're not allowed to block in any case, for example, Microsoft update. If you would do so, you would be doing tremendous damages instead of solving a problem. So even though, which I don't think ever happened, Microsoft would be compromised, we would not block the IP addresses of Microsoft updates. It's up to you guys to clean the mess. But that's the way we avoid to block some very important IP addresses like Quad 9, Quad 8, Quad 1, Akamai core IPs, and so on. So, and last but not least, we have an AI that is sorting out what IP addresses are working together in a coordinated fashion. So say, for example, IP A is scanning, IP B is probing the version numbers and the banners, and I don't know, they are trying to pinpoint more precisely the target. IP C is compromising, and IP D is extracting data. If you see this just from your own perspective, you see 4 different IPs coming at 4 different times trying to do 4 different things. But at the scale of our network, which counts 250,000 installs, we see a pattern. Like IP A, B, C, and D are always coming one after another in different places doing the same thing. And then we can tell, even though they look very different, they are coordinated by the same cyber criminal. But that was complicated to pull this one off. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see why that'd be hard.
Yeah. So the 250,000 installs you say, this will only get better the more installs you have, right?
Yes, because the network effect makes it so it's a Metcalfe flow, right? So every time a new member is joining, is reinforcing the network effect and making it more readily available for everyone. So of course, we have a lot of signals that are duplicated. Like when an IP goes rogue, sometimes we have 1,000 reports in some minutes. That's fine, because the more we have, the more certainty we have that we are not poisoned, that enough people saw it so that it cannot be random. And also, it allows us to get more and more real time. Already, we are able to include IP addresses within the day. Now we are looking at an hour, and we are looking down to 1 minute when the network will be big enough. So if an IP is very aggressive, it would be in the block list in a minute, which is insane. It just doesn't exist. It's just impossible if you don't have this kind of network to put this kind of reactivity.
Yeah, you talked about the AI. Everybody talks about AI. But I would assume you've got some machine learning that's looking at those IP addresses. You talked about, okay, there's 1,000 within a few minutes. Probably have some ML that's going in and looking and saying, okay, if it's over a certain threshold, then we're going to do something with this, right?
Yeah, and you know what keeps me up at night is not the defensive AIs, because we are on the good side of the fence, but the offensive AI. I know for a fact that some governments, and some private institutions are training as we speak offensive AIs, not the one drawing nice pictures, right? The one that are really going to screw you up and all your entire system instantly. And the way they do it is they use CTF logs, capture the flag logs, from real players that are using real techniques to attack. They are also using logs of attacks that happen in different places, from CM and so on and so forth. And they are trained on those patterns. Now, the next thing you know, an IP address is scanned what? 2,000 to 4,000 times a day lately. When the offensive AI will be unleashed, we speak of a magnitude higher, like 10 to 20 to 30,000 times a day. And those AI will be able to hammer your infrastructure in milliseconds. Whereas even the best cyber criminal, it takes him seconds or minutes or to change the reactions and potentially compromise you. So it's the next level DevSecOps, but on the wrong side of the fence. And I'm really worried about that. And the only way we can block them, up to me, is by using a crowdsourced effect. Because if those AIs are going to spam a lot of attacks instantly, you need to be able to catch them as fast as you can. And this is where we think, the next level of this gray zone war that is cybercrime and cyber aggressions between states will take us to.
Well, everything needs an address. Everything needs to access the internet to be able to accomplish that thing, whatever AI it happens to be. So it will have an address. It will have an IP address, right, of some sort.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes. And there's an infinite number of domain names, but there's just a finite number of IP addresses.
Right. Malik, did you have another question? I think you did.
Yeah. So Philippe, if I just taking one scenario, if I add my public IP address into your portal, right, search engine, then it will automatically assign some sort of label, right? So let's say it will be like aggressive IP address for brute force attack, let's say. So how it will in backend, how it will assign those some sort of particular labels to our public IP address?
Yeah, so this is a security engine that is at the core of this decision. Since it's seeing your actions in the logs and you triggered a behavioral scenario saying like it did more than that many mistakes in connection, in authentication within a certain time frame, then it will classify it as being a brute force attack, password brute force attack.
Okay.
if you see, for example, a lot of closed ports being probed and dropping packets on your firewall, this is a port scan. If you see a lot of 404, 403, 50 something codes, status codes in your HTTP logs, this is a web scan, and so on for the VoIP. And you can even do very interesting stuff. So we all remember this painful moment of lapsus, right? I'm not going to put oil on fire, but those guys, they were really good at buying real credentials and doing what's called credential reuse. So someone would sell their real credentials, and then the lapsus group would connect to the infrastructure, kill the XDR in memory, and then roam the place. The thing is, there's a way of detecting those that is not technical, because technically it's a real password and a real username. So you're screwed, Except you can use the impossible traveler scenario, the impossible traveler behavior. What is the impossible traveler? Is money connecting in a place, because actually you usually work from, say, Dublin, and all of a sudden, you're not in Dublin, you're in Perth, Australia. What happened? Well, you're not supposed to connect from Perth, Australia. So we'll tell you, something is fishy here. Because behavior-wise, Moloch never connects from Perth usually. He's connecting from Dublin. So even though the person has a real credential, behavior-wise, you can catch them.
So Moloch, just go ahead and stick your IP address in the chat there, and we'll let everybody know that.
We'll put it in the comment chat. So Philip, I wrote down 4 questions based on some comments that you had, and I'll start at the one that's tech and get down to the business one. Not that it's super relevant unless you're an ISP or some type of CDN. What about IPv6 support?
Yeah, so IPv6, first of all, it's on the rise, like crazy. Like, I was told ever since I was a student engineer that, IPv6 is the next big thing, and we waited for it 20 years before it even became a reality. Now, with the 5G rolling out and so on, there is a lot of use cases for the IPv6, but what we see for the last quarter is an increase that is magnitude higher in the IPv6 that are used to carry attacks. It used to be very limited, like 0.8%, 1%. Now it rose to something like 10 to 15% in 6 months. So it's really impressive. There's a ramp up of the IPv6 carrier attack that is extremely meaningful. It's not really a problem for us to deal with it. So yes, there are far more IPv6 than IPv4s, but IPv6 are attributed in a group, in a range. So you don't get one IPv6, you usually get a /48, so a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So we can safely blacklist the whole range and not just one. So it makes things easier for us because we don't have to deal with the magnitude of IPv6, just with the group that we are the group that we are seeing. Because IPv6 in the end is made to have something like 20,000 different IP addresses available per square meter on Earth, so that we can have all our personal network of machines around ourselves. So it's future-proof, right? But in the end, it's not made to have like 20,000 machines exposed over the internet per square meter on Earth. That's not the point. That's why we allocate like very large ranges. Mm-hmm. We can block them as well.
Well, from that, you said something about carrier. And my next question I wrote down here is like, how are you dealing with hotspots? Because in 5G, I'm seeing some wonky behavior when I jump on my T-Mobile hotspot, and some places like they don't like that. Are you finding issues with being able to utilize your services for bad actor IPs based on hotspots? Can you differentiate?
Yeah, so very tricky, very tricky. So first, the problem you're referring to is known as carrier grid net. So they use several IP addresses, say 100 per tower, and they carry your traffic out. So 100 IP addresses times 1,000 ports. One tower can carry like 100,000 messages at once. So it's not like you have one IP to cover your whole conversation. It's every time you will send a packet, you will get a temporary IP port combo to carry it and to in return recover it. So for us, it's tricky to actually deal with this kind of traffic, but it's also tricky for cyber criminals to use these kind of IP addresses because they don't get symmetrical NAT. So it's a nightmare to get covered channels or answers to your questions, and also they are very filtered. So it's not so easy for them. Now, the other problem we can face, and this is a problem I forgot to mention when you asked the question, is proxies, residential proxies, VPN, and proxies in a general way. So what if, say, a group of users is sitting behind a proxy, like 4 proxies, and there are 10,000 going through only 4 public IP addresses. One is a bad actor. One is scanning the internet. One is doing crap, whatever they're doing. We will block this IP address, the proxy IP address, but behind it is probably 2.5 thousand users that will be then punished for just one person doing crap. So the way we solve this problem is the following. First of all, we tell our users, it's not an eye for an eye. It doesn't make sense, right? It's not the Italian law. So if you're, say, a retailer, for example, don't just drop the IP address. Use, for example, a CAPTCHA. This will protect you against bots scrapping or phishing or whatever they are trying to do. And it will not prevent the regular human to connect to your system. So that's fair. You went through the problem. Another thing is it's extremely unlikely that you have a collision in between this precise user group and your precise machines on your end. And even if the system would be extremely successful and everybody would use CrowdSec, you can also unban your IP address. You just ask for it because it's GDPR compliant, so we have to get this request. Now, if you unban it wrongfully, because you still have this person that is doing crap internally and you didn't solve your problem, this IP will be eventually returned into the block list, but with a harder timeline. It will not be cleared out after 4 hours, but after 4 days. And after it, the second time it will be 4 weeks, and so on and so forth. So you get an increased penalty if you are a returner into the block list. And this is how we deal with those kind of problems. And also there's another limitation to the system, which is we cannot deal with UDP, right? Because since we are on public IP addresses, UDP is extremely simple to spoof, to change your source IP address. So we cannot trust any report that is coming from a UDP environment, a UDP carried scenario. We only consider the one that are based on TCP. Now, again, carrying attacks only in UDP is fairly complicated.
Yeah, it is. You got to do some traffic manipulation. I came from a networking background, so I'm getting everything you say, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So you sound very technical. So my next question, are you a working CEO? Because you sound very technical. After a while, management and ownership beats the tech out of you because you got to go run the business, right?
The tech out of you. Yeah.
Are you technical?
Yeah, I used to be. I gave up on my boxing gloves of red team pen test 15 years ago. I was a bit sad because it was a lot of fun, like really a lot of fun. But going to the CEO direction, I had to give the baby to my CTO. He's far better than I am and I ever will be, technically speaking. So I'm the owner of the vision, co-owner of the vision with him, and he's doing the technical work and I'm doing the business work. So it's still my baby in terms of I know what problem we're solving, but he's the one solving the problems. And I'm fine with this. I'm probably past the edge where I can be good at it. So that's okay for me.
And my last question, which is number 4 on the sticky pad, the way you go about crowdsourcing your CrowdSec, have you found a situation where it's strategic to go buy a customer because of who and what they are and what they do, that you give it to them? Because Akamai used to do that. And I used to be an Akamai guy. They would go out and say, because of the number of the class that you have, very few people may have a class A that they still own, or a class B, huge networks. We'll give you the service if you register these IPs with us. Have you found yourself in that situation?
Not really yet. I mean, we have requests for range monitoring. So people asking to monitor their ranges. So if an IP goes rogue, we know it and they will know it in the first place. But we found another use case. It's slightly around your question, but I think you'll like it, Edward. So the thing is the following. Now we have, for example, a lot of banks using the product. If there are IP addresses that are aggressive against banks, but only against banks, we can tell for sure that those IP addresses are far more dangerous for you than any other we have in the list. And I'll give you even a further example down the line is, say, we have IP addresses that are aggressive toward Le Monde, which is a French media, during the election time of the presidency. And then against Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany during the chancellor election. And then against the New York Times during the presidential election in the US. What can we tell about this IP address? We never saw it elsewhere. We just see it against media, and moreover, during the presidential campaigns. Well, we know it's a troll farm. We know those are probably our Russian friends trying to play tricks with your media, right? So because we are not honeypots based, but real workloads based, we can stick IP addresses or IP ranges to certain activities, vertically speaking. These IPs are aggressive against automotive industry. These IPs are aggressive against, I don't know, retail industry and so on and so forth. So this is what we call attribution and keeping them into a cohort. And that has a lot of value, I think.
I think you answered this question earlier in the thing about making sure you don't block some of the major players. Like, a scenario in my head is I'm a bad actor. I'm scanning using Shodan or something, and I see that your RADP is exposed to one of your servers in Azure. And could a security disruption be that because you're publicly exposing your IP, I could give it to your product, and then now you're banning someone's IP that they use for a jump server in Azure?
No, because we would need a lot of reports in this direction, and you would only be giving us one report.
Okay.
We need to integrate an IP address into the block list. We need to have at least 50 different vetted members that put the crowd pressure on this IP address. We call it the crowd pressure. So the consensus is putting the crowd pressure on it. And if you don't have enough members of very diversified background vetting your signal, it will never make it through the block list. On the contrary, the day the pressure is lowering, the IP is free. We release it from the block list. So it could sound like a naive approach, but our goal is to avoid at all costs broadcasting a false positive, because this is a business killer. So we'd rather be on the conservative end. Now, nevertheless, with this block list that is right now 50, 60,000 IP addresses out of 43 million we have under custody, we still are blocking 92% of the attacks, the inbound attacks, solely based on the reputation of the IP addresses. 8% are left to the security engine on the behavioral standpoint. But what I mean here is that the crowdsourced block list does 92% of the job already of the blocking the inbound attacks. So it's working in real life.
Okay. Very cool.
That's pretty awesome. So going back to the AI thing, we're getting close to the end here. Andrea's going, let's get it going. I think she's hungry. I don't know. Maybe she's just excited for Barbie. I'm not sure. But there was a question earlier, going back to the AI thing just a little bit. I don't know if this is what you're doing with the AI, but this was a great question because this is something a lot of people are focused on right now, even in the security space, right? The training models, how are you updating those and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so the problem here is we are a cybersecurity specialists and not AI specialists. So there's a huge gap here. So we have data scientists, and the guys started to train models on identifying, for example, the first priority for us was to identify residential proxies and VPNs, because then we would apply a rule set different because those IPs are shared, obviously, than IP addresses that are stick to one business or one person. So in order to do so, we have a lot of data that we are using to train our AIs, and we are also sourcing from people like Shodan that you mentioned earlier. We love those guys. They are doing great work in the field. They are a really cool source of information. So we share a lot of information with others. So we enrich a lot the information we have, and we train our models on this until they are, parroting properly. This is a VPN. This is a residential proxy. This is not. And when we try to do cohorts, it's a bit different. We dig into this huge data set. We get something like 20 million IOCs per day, give or take. So we dig into this huge pool of data. What we look for is not so much something that is constantly changing, it's rather the opposite. We look to behavior that are consistent over time. But yet again, we are not an AI company yet. We are recruiting our professionals. And if you want to apply at CrowdSec for AI, please do. I know everyone is trying to get you guys. But yeah, there is a tremendous stack of data to analyze. And we are very much willing to dive into
it. We really appreciate you coming on, Phil. Wait, something in my lap again. But this is an odd recording time for us. I actually do really sort of have a hard stop here. So, any more questions from my fellow host, this gentleman? All right.
I think we're good. We do need to hook up afterwards, Philippe, because I'm getting a lot of.
We don't want to prevent Super Andrea from going to see Barbie.
Do not want to make Super Andrea mad.
Yeah. We don't want that.
I don't want to play-by-play either. Don't tell me about it.
Well, sir, it was good to meet you again, to hear your voice again. When I saw the name, it finally clicked. Like, yeah, I've met this guy a while back. So you still sound the same. You still have the same talk track and everything, right? So I'm glad your company is successful. I'll let Mark know that I bumped into you on my podcast. I got it.
Thank you, Edward.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes,
thank you.
Merci,
Thank you
Philippe.
so much, Malik. Thank you and congratulations once again. Thank you for your hard work. We appreciate you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
See you soon.